The Office of the Prime Minister Press Office is the primary liaison between the Fourth Estate and the Office of the Prime Minister and Cabinet.
Every day, we're working to build a more inclusive economy and a stronger, safer country.
Hear all of the latest developments as the Davis administration carries out the broad mandate of progress and change. Our live weekly press briefings provide full access to current newsmakers on the most topical issues of the day. We facilitate prompt responses from cabinet ministers on the latest reports and get answers on the issues that matter to you.
Will any penalties be levied against the
OPM Press Now, keeping you in the know. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister. Welcome to our press briefing. Always good to see reporters present. We'd also like to welcome those watching online. This morning we're discussing the very important topic of the cost of living. As we've continued to say, this is a major priority of the Davis administration. Everyone's been abuzz this week, it seems, about the price of eggs. More importantly, the huge slash in the price of eggs, which the government is very happy to see. This morning, we are going to talk through Senator Barry Griffin, who is our main guest today, about how that came about, and also forecast some of the other interventions being made to lower the cost on other food items that we buy every day in the grocery stores. Senator Griffin is, of course, chairman of the Bahamas Trade Commission and the chief negotiator for the Bahamas. Supporting him this morning will be Carrie Howells, the COO of CIX Logistics Bahamas, and Jasmine Williams, COO of Global South. They are both partners with the government in the Trade Diversification Program. I also want to acknowledge here for support this morning Senators Michael Halkitis and Randy Roll. So without further ado, please welcome Senator Barry Griffin.
Good morning. I mean, I know we're here reporting, very serious business, but you have a little bit more energy in the room. Good morning. And another reason to have more energy is because today is a great day. We're here to announce some great news, talk about some great things that the government is doing, and provide valuable information for businesses and consumers. So I'm very happy to be here. So as Keishla would have indicated, we're talking about the cost of living, and the first thing I want to say is that we are witnessing in real time the government's cost of living goals being realized. In January, the Prime Minister would have done a national address where he focused specifically on economics. He would have announced two major initiatives, one being the slash in VAT on food items, where he indicated that that's sort of a first step in providing support for Bahamians on the cost of living. But the major thing he announced was the announcement of the launch of Affordable Bahamas, which is the government's sort of multi-agency, sort of wide-spanning economic plan to bring down the cost of living. Now, within that program, Affordable Bahamas, there are three key initiatives that I'm happy to be working on under Minister Michael Halkitis, who's providing us much support from the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Trade Commission, of which I am chairman. So the first thing would be the National Trade Diversification Program. So we are seeing in real time with the huge slash in the cost of eggs, trade diversification working exactly as the government has promoted over the last year. So essentially, what we're doing with our trade diversification program is two things. One, we are simply encouraging businesses to look at different options for diversifying their trade, diversifying the suppliers and manufacturers that they get goods from, diversifying their supply chains and how goods come to the Bahamas. We, as a government, believe that one of the reasons that cost in the Bahamas is so expensive for many goods is because we are not getting the best prices on goods. We buy most of our goods from a single jurisdiction, from a single place within that jurisdiction, and from a small amount of suppliers. And so the government's official policy is to encourage the private sector to diversify that, to go directly to the source, go directly to manufacturers and suppliers that many of the folks that they're buying from now are getting the raw materials and raw products from. And so for large businesses that are able to do this on their own, we're encouraging them to do that on their own. But for the small and medium-sized businesses who need a little bit of support, the government is providing that support through the official National Trade Diversification Program, where we've partnered with companies like Global South Export Import and CLX Logistics, where they are literally helping us to meet with manufacturers and suppliers on the ground in different countries and bring those products here to the Bahamas. So these are Bahamian companies that have a presence, that have connections, that have contacts all over the world, and they're utilizing it for our benefit. I'm happy to announce that CLX Logistics, who is one of our partners in this initiative, was the partner for SuperValue in bringing the eggs to the Bahamas. And so Kerry Howes, their COO, is here today, and he will talk a little bit more about that process and also speak about more things that we can get from the Dominican Republic and other countries. And Jasmine Williams from Global South is here to talk about the great work she's doing with countries such as Panama, Ecuador, and Brazil, and working closely with small businesses here to bring those goods to the country. So, as I said before, we're seeing in real time the government's cost of living goals being realized. Our goal is simply to slash the price of as many goods as possible over the short term. And so what has happened with eggs is only the beginning. We are here to announce that we expect a 20 to 60% decrease of a new round of products over the short term. Everything from chicken and poultry, pork, beef, kidney beans, lima beans, limes, a whole slew of canned goods such as tuna, sardine, corned beef, rice, all things that we are currently getting from various suppliers, mostly in the United States. But when we go directly to the sources in Latin America and the Caribbean, we're able to bring these goods at a much cheaper rate. And the only thing we ask of our partners in this initiative is to make sure that those cost savings are passed on to the Bahamians. Just as you've seen with the eggs, where eggs in some places went from $15 and $16 to $3 and $4. And so our plan is to work very closely with industry to make this happen. I want to reiterate, this program is a government-supported and government-facilitated program, but the private sector is really the drivers of this. So we're working with our private sector partners to make this happen. So we're working on a lot of products. I also want to talk a little bit about, we don't live in a vacuum. We see the discourse on social media. And so we just want to talk a little bit about how trade and export works. The reality is we must go to countries that have a competitive advantage in producing certain goods. We're not going to be able to produce everything here in country, and we're not going to be able to get the best cost on these goods if we go to a single jurisdiction. The reality is that countries in Latin America specialize in commodities, specialize in fruits and vegetables, and specialize in the production of meat and poultry. So they've become experts in these things, and they export all over the world. If you look to the United States, for example, one of the things that's happening there is that their government is now lamenting their trade deficit with other countries. What does that mean? It means that America is importing from these very same countries that we're looking at, and their government is now saying, hey, we want a little bit more of that production to come to the United States and stay in the United States. And so the very same products that we're importing here in this country, they're importing in the United States. They're importing in Canada. They're importing all throughout Latin America, the Middle East, Asia, Europe. In fact, we can report that much of the commodities, such as fruits and vegetables that are consumed in Europe, for example, come from Africa, come from Latin America. The same thing in the Middle East. A lot of the companies that we're speaking to, for example, in Trinidad and Brazil, they supply the bulk of food to the Middle East. And so these are high quality products that are consumed all over the world. And so Bahamians need not worry about it from that end. We're working with legitimate and verified suppliers, working with the various governments around the world to ensure that we're working with the best companies and the best suppliers so that Bahamians receive high quality products in this country. And so with that said, the other thing that I also wanted to announce today is that the work we're doing in the trade program does not only extend to the food industry. The other big industry we're looking at tackling is building supplies and the construction industry. So right now, behind the scenes, we're working with local retailers and wholesalers, working with international companies to provide lower cost but still high quality building supplies. And so we expect that we can see in the short term, things such as cheaper cement and steel that are a big part of building in this country. So when we say we're lowering the cost of living, it's not just food, but it's all the things that are added to have that burden of a high cost of living in the Bahamas. And again, we're working with some of our Bahamian partners to do exactly that. And so at this time, I wanted to introduce both Carrie Howes, the CEO of CLX Logistics, and Jasmine Williams, the COO of Global South Export Import, so that they can tell you a little bit about their role in the trade diversification program. Carrie can speak a little bit about the eggs and how that came about, and then I'll come back to speak a little bit about the two other initiatives that we're working on to lower the cost of living. So right now, please help me welcome Carrie Howes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kerry Howells. I'm the COO of CLX Logistics Bahamas, and we've been working close along with the government with the Trade Initiative Program with Senator Barry Griffin and also Senator Roll, and also being assisted by Minister Alcides in any way possible to assist with trying to reduce the cost of living for Bahamians. I don't want to take any much of the credit for the egg situation because we were a small part in the supply chain, but SuperValue did reach out to a supplier through somebody that we also do business with, and they facilitated that particular transaction. But we also have our own suppliers, and we work along with, believe it or not, Bahamians who have established businesses in the Dominican Republic that actually source these goods. They go to the packing houses, and they are certified and have all necessary documentation to export food products out of the Dominican Republic. We also assist with facilitating shipments from the Dominican Republic, which arrive to the Bahamas 3 times a month, every 10 days, with actually a cheaper pallet rate than shipping from the United States. So with us trying our best to create new supply chains and create new trade routes and actually being on the ground and communicating with these suppliers, we want to give Bahamians sort of a level of comfort when importing a lot of these products from countries that they're not necessarily familiar with, even though a lot of these products were transshipped through the United States and came through our familiar supply chains into the Bahamas. So what we're just trying to do basically, as Barry alluded to, was necessarily cut out a lot of the middleman, a lot of the distributors, and go directly to the suppliers so that those costs can be saved by Bahamians and obviously reduce the cost of living for us locally. When it comes to the building supplies, we also ship building supplies direct from those source countries, from Puerto Rico, from the Dominican Republic, directly into the Bahamas. And we pass those savings on to Bahamians because, again, this entire supply chain is managed by Bahamians. We are sourcing the products with Bahamians. The ships that are actually bringing these products directly to the Bahamas are Bahamian-owned vessels. And we're just trying to figure out creative ways to make life a little bit easier for everyone in our country. There are other options as well too globally that we've been working with. Like we've established an office in Ghana, Africa. We have a shipment actually on the way in transit to the Bahamas right now. We've been working along with Melissa Darville, Robin Lightburn with the African Cooperative Society to bring in these products from other regions across the world. But mainly because the Dominican Republic is in such close proximity to the Bahamas, and we already have existing vessels that travel here every 10 days. We have utilized that supply chain because we also recognize that they just produce so much goods down in that country and at affordable rates. So we are looking forward to working along with small and medium-sized businesses where we can assist them with consolidating their shipments so that if you can't afford to, say, ship an entire container to the Bahamas, you could work along with Global South and other logistics companies, but mainly Global South, who we've identified as our partner in this, to gather these companies together so that they could fill an entire shipment and so that they could receive the wholesale rates for purchasing these food products. So anyone could reach me at info@clxnow.com, and we are more than open and welcome to working with small, medium-sized, and individual persons as well in this initiative. So I just wanted to say again, and give a special thanks to the government of the Bahamas for working along with companies like us to assist us with this. The Ministry of Agriculture and BAHFSA for assisting with bringing in these products and ensuring that these products are healthy and up to standards and that they have all the required documentation from these source countries to be imported into our country. So thank you again for the opportunity to speak, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jasmine Williams. I am the COO of Global South. It is just an honor to stand here today as we recognize a significant step forward to making essential goods more affordable for Bahamians. The recent reduction in egg prices is just a testament to strategic sourcing, to show us what strategic sourcing can do, show us what collaboration with partners like CLX and Global South can do to give us some economic relief here in the country. At Global South, we recognize that affordability should not come at the expense of quality. Our mission is to ensure that Bahamians can access goods at prices that reflect both fairness and sustainability. We partner with a bunch of, we partners with suppliers in Panama and Ecuador who help us source items like bread, oil, cooking oil, rice, produce, seafood, and fruits and vegetables that are at prices that are competitive. These items are safe, like CLX mentioned. We take partners down, a few Bahamian businesses down to Panama and Ecuador. We go to these warehouses. We ensure that these items can be imported into our country through the Ministry of Agriculture. We are here to stabilize household expenses. We are helping with food security in the country. And regardless of any Bahamian economic standing, we help them ensure that all of the items that they are bringing out can support Bahamians to live a life with dignity. So if you are interested in helping our collective efforts, you can reach out to me at sales@Global South, EXIM, or visit our website at globalsouthexim.com.
So thank you so much. So these are just some of our partners in the initiative, and something that just is an aside, we're very happy to be working with Bahamian companies that are doing these things all over the world. And so we are extending the benefit of our partnership to Bahamian companies. And so in particular, I just want to reiterate that Global South will be largely focused on working with small and medium-sized businesses who do not on their own have the capacity to order large pallets of goods or containers of goods. So Global South will be working with them to put their orders together in a bulk order so that they too can get the wholesale prices that larger companies like a Super Value would be able to do on their own. And CLX is one of our larger partners who is working with us in terms of the actual physical logistics of moving goods from country to country. CLX didn't mention this, but we're also working closely with them on a proposed trade route throughout the Caribbean. So from the Bahamas to Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and back. And so this route is also intended to export Bahamian products. So just as we're bringing goods from these countries, we want our goods from the Bahamas to be able to flow through the same supply chain to go to the rest of the Caribbean. And so those are just a few things that we're working on. So how soon can we expect all these things to come to fruition? That's the question a lot of people are asking. And we want to say that these things are happening right now before your very eyes. As you can see, the egg prices have already dropped. We've been working for a long time with other businesses behind the scenes. As Jasmine would have indicated, there's now a group of Bahamian wholesalers and retailers who will be doing a mission to Panama and Ecuador at the beginning of April. And the idea is that once they go to these factories, they see everything in action, they verify for themselves the quality of the products, they'll order right on the spot, and we can expect a shipment from those countries within weeks. And so we can say positively that by summer, we hope to see a vast reduction in a lot of the most frequently used and consumed goods that every Bahamian uses. And so that is our time for that. And so just briefly to mention the other two things. So trade diversification is a bulk of what the government is working on. The other thing we're working on to lower the cost of living, you've heard the word competition in a lot of this. And so the Bahamas is one of the only jurisdictions in the developed world that does not have competition law. In the US, they call it antitrust law. Most of the rest of the world, they call it competition law. And this is simply laws and a body that regulates competition, ensuring that consumers get the best prices, ensuring that businesses are innovative and they're competing, that ensuring that monopolistic practices aren't happening, and that companies aren't abusing market dominance. And so right now we are in the consulting phase in drafting the legislation, and we hope to have that legislation in Parliament before summer as well. Here I'd like to announce that we are now partnering with the Bahamas Chamber of Commerce on the consulting phase of the legislation. So we're working with the Chamber of Commerce behind the scenes right now to map out an education plan and consulting plan where we intend to go to various islands of the Bahamas to educate businesses, to get their input, and to get their feedback before any bill is tabled in Parliament. The first of which will be March 19th in Abaco at a town hall hosted by the Abaco Chamber of Commerce. And so again, we're saying that in all of this, we are working hand in hand with the private sector. The very last thing that we're working on in the first iteration of Affordable Bahamas is price transparency. One of the things that Bahamians have complained to us is that it takes too much time and too much effort to find the cost of goods in this country. You literally have to go to 3 and 4 and 5 stores to find out the prices yourself, or call 3 and 4 and 5 stores. And that takes away your time, and that's an added cost to the consumer. It's also not very fair, and it isn't in line with competition in terms of international standards. And so the government is now looking at all of the laws on the books to enforce any price transparency laws that we currently have, but we are also investing in an app where the prices of virtually all goods in the Bahamas will be put. We're starting with the food sector with breadbasket items and expanding to all the items that you'd find in a grocery store. And then we're expanding to the construction materials sector where Bahamians would be able to just simply use an app, compare prices, compare brands, compare quality and stats, and decide where they want to shop. We believe that when you put more of the power in the hands of the consumer to have as much information as possible, they make decisions that are better for themselves, hence decreasing the cost of living. And so with that, before we get to any questions you may have, I want to invite Senator Randy Roll, who is chairman of the Consumer Protection Commission, to speak a little bit about how his agency is working closely with Affordable Bahamas. Senator Roll.
Pleasant good morning. Have some prepared notes. Good afternoon, everyone. It's certainly a pleasure to be here today to update you. First of all, I want to be able to update you on some Consumer Protection Commission's work for the Bahamian people. You may have observed my comments and Commission's public stance on a number of areas of consumer concerns over the past several months. And it may have appeared that CPC was all over the place. But I assure you, to achieve success where there was little in the past, you must do some things differently. To this end, I am proud to inform you that so far for 2025, our hard-working Complaints and Investigations Department has successfully resolved 11 complaint matters equaling a total dollar value of $15,664.02. with investigations into 33 other cases still ongoing with a total dollar value of $47,000. This is an impressive figure and a strong indication that this year's closing out figures shall substantially increase on last year's total figures of 444 complaints and the Commission's dollar recovery value of $242,250.50. I'm also pleased to announce that since taking office at the CPC, my team and I have been executing certain steps publicly and discreetly to bring stronger rights and a louder voice to consumers. And after consultation with the Bahamas Bureau of Business Standards and Quality, the CPC and BBSQ collaboratively approached the ISO to become a participating member of its International Consumer Policy Committee. Our application has been accepted by its chairman, and we are anticipating that this initiative, collaborating with fellow members and working towards shared goals that benefit the broader consumer community, will ultimately contribute significantly to using standards as a tool for greater consumer protection in the Bahamas. The International Organization of Standards, ISO, is an international federation of national standard bodies from more than 160 countries, one from each member country. It sets standards for the quality of goods and services in the world. Price gouging is widely considered an unfair trade practice as it involves business excessively raising prices, often during emergencies or when there is a high demand for a product, taking advantage of consumers' vulnerability and potentially harming their ability to access necessary goods. Working in tandem with the Ministry of Labor, Bahamas Chamber of Commerce, Bahamas Trade Commission, and the Price Control, the CPC is working towards stronger enforcement of laws in regard to these particular type of violations. The Consumer Protection Act 2023, which gives the CPC its legislative powers, addresses certain expectations of providers of goods and services, and certainly price gouging, especially beyond breadbasket items, qualifies as unfair trade practice, which falls within the purview of CPC. This is why my team continue to conduct site visits and inspect shelves of various providers, especially, and borrowing the term from the police, those that are known to us. Consumers call our hotline and our main office daily to complain about various issues plaguing them, from providers refusing to refund when it's clearly a defective good, purchases to expired items that are also outdated that is outrageous to even offer them as a discount. And then, of course, the price gouging. This is certainly a source of contention for consumers, and my team and my board of commissioners are still in discussions and crafting our advisory proposal for Minister Michael Alcides in regard to suggesting the amendments to our act that will speak in depth specifically to this violation. I feel that once it is spelled out in layman's terms and obligations and penalties are plain as day, persons see that we as a commission are serious about addressing and enforcing the right of consumers. In regards to the eggs, while my commission does not have direct oversight as the Bahamas Agriculture, Food, and Safety Authority, we certainly do have our influence as far as our mandate to protect all consumers. And so this again raises issues regarding standards, whereas consumers ensure that consumer rights, prevents fraud, and enforces fair competition. Standards support basic consumer protection by raising levels of quality, safety, reliability, and efficiency, and interchangeability. Now, Senator Barry talked about the app, the competition app, that what we find is a lot of persons, like he would have said, go different places looking for certain things that they're not able to find, and sometimes some places have it at extremely different prices. Most times people complain to us, and once they complain to the Consumer Protection Commission, we then assign a person from our investigations department that goes out and does their private investigations. What has happened too is persons have seen us in the public and have came to us, again, expressing different concerns as it relates to products on their shelves. And so we're going to continue to work closely with the Trade Commission closely with our providers to make sure that Bahamians at all times receive the greatest in terms of standard and quality of goods. In the Consumer Protection Act that was passed by the government in 2023, it also states that, consumers have a right to certain basic questions and needs and concerns. And so what my board will do is to make sure that all of these questions, once they are brought to us, are answered in a satisfactory manner. Thank you.
So you heard many of us speak about what we refer to as BASFA, the Bahamas Agricultural Health and Food Safety Authority. Again, we don't live in a vacuum. We see commentary in different spaces. So we just wanted to assure the public that every single good, every single product that comes into this country, no matter where it comes from, whether it comes from the United States and Canada, or it comes from the Dominican Republic or Ecuador or Panama, they have to pass the exact same requirements and meet the exact same standards. So no standards of any kind will be lowered or changed to facilitate goods coming into this country from various other jurisdictions. So the exact same high quality standards that your goods from the United States would have to meet to come into the Bahamas are the same standards they would have to meet to come from any other country. And so I'll just read a little bit of an excerpt from BASFA. So BASFA ensures that food imports from any country are safe by requiring import permits, verifying certifications, and checking compliance with safety standards. Certain products may be restricted or prohibited. BASFA collaborates with regulatory agencies in other countries and considers international food safety standards like those of the US. Upon arrival in the Bahamas, imports undergo inspections and also lab testing for contaminants. These steps help to protect public health and maintain food safety standards. And so again, we want to assure and reassure the public that the goods that are coming into this country all have to meet the exact same standards. We know that those were some of the questions or concerns from the public, and we wanted to take this time to address those. And so with that, I know our minister, he indicated to me that he didn't want to speak, so I won't require him to speak, but I just wanted him to come up here for a moment. Minister, yeah, he didn't expect this, but what I just wanted to say is the minister's presence here is a testament to the high level support this is given from the government. So most of the organizations that are involved in these trade issues come under the Minister of Economic Affairs. And so I just wanted to thank Minister Alcides for his high-level support, always being there to have meetings, listen to us, and facilitate everything that we need in terms of resources, and in particular, in terms of the money that we need to fund these programs and make sure these things happen, and I put him here to put him on the spot so that the Bahamian people can hold all of us accountable in making this happen. Yes. But the minister is very supportive of this. As I said before, this is one of the Prime Minister's key initiatives in his economic agenda for this year. And so by this, we also want to assure the public that this is getting the highest level of support from the government, and that the cost of living is something that is central to this government's agenda, and that we're working steadily on it. So I know you didn't want to speak, but
no, I
you got to say some words.
Yeah, no, just good morning to all. And I said to Mrs. Adley that I wanted the chairman of the Trade Commission, Senator Barry Griffin, and the chairman of the Consumer Protection Commission, Senator Randy Roll, to speak to you today to show the work that they're doing, as he said, with the full support of the Ministry of Economic Affairs and the Office of the Prime Minister. As you can see, Senator Griffin and Senator Roll have really grasped this mission and have demonstrated a lot of passion and commitment and fervor in pursuing this very, very important mission of assisting to bringing down the cost of living for Bahamians. And so I'm very, very pleased just to be here with them today. Also to thank our private sector partners from CLX Logistics and Global South. And just to say to the Bahamian people, you know, this work, you can see the passion that Senator Griffin displayed. And so this work will be continuing and expanding, and we invite all Bahamians in business, and as well as consumers, to take part. So thank you very much, Senator Griffin. I'll now take my seat, but this is your day. I just wanted the Bahamian people to see that we have these young senators who are really grasping this very, very important mission and really running with it and already seeing results. Thank you very much. Well done.
Awesome. Okay, so from our agenda that we have here, I will end sort of the official part by saying again, our cost of living goals are being realized. The government is working extremely hard behind the scenes and in the public sphere to make sure that we're doing all that we can to lower the cost of living. We've seen it in particular with one product, eggs. As I said before, our goal this year is to go one by one and do the exact same thing with products across things that you would find in the grocery store. And the next thing we're tackling is building supplies. So we've already seen the Ministry of Energy bring down the cost of energy. Now we're looking at bringing down the cost of food and the cost of building supplies in this country, because these are the things that Bahamians have elected us to do, and these are the things that we've said that we're going to do, and so we're making good on our promises. And so with that, I will open the floor for questions, comments.
I just wanted to ask, right, why aren't we, while what we're doing is applaudable, right, why aren't we using the funds to pump into local farmers to help with egg production?
So I won't speak incredibly long on that because that comes under the purview of the Ministry of Agriculture. But what I will say is we are investing in the production of eggs in the country, as you would know, with the Golden Yolk program, which the government has recently announced that we have reinvested in it, waiting on certain machinery to pump that program up. So we are investing in local production in eggs, and we are, I can say that the Trade Commission is also working closely with BAIC and BAMSI in particular to support farmers. So for example, through our import program, we're looking at bringing in cheaper inputs that will help farmers. So for example, we want their goods to be able to compete on the market. And so for Bahamian farmers who produce chicken, for example, we're looking at bringing in more cost-effective chicken feed, which is one of the most expensive things in producing chicken, and so that their chicken that they produce here would be more cost competitive. And so while we speak a lot about imports, the reality is we import about 90% of the things that we use in this country, we import. And so if we want to bring down the cost of living, there has to be a huge focus on imports. However, we are investing in production and increasing local capacity. And that's not just in the food sphere, that's also in the light manufacturing sphere. And so I'll allow the Ministry of Agriculture to go a little bit more in detail, but I will say we are investing and reinvesting in agriculture and fisheries in this country.
We were hoping to ask Minister Alcides. I understand that he might not want to speak, but we understand that the Bahamas exports very little to the U.S., but given that Trump has promised retaliatory tariffs on countries that have tariffs on American goods, are officials concerned that our customs duties regime may be outdated and draw scrutiny in an era when America is embracing protectionist policies?
I'll address it after you finish with it.
Okay.
That's it.
I just want to ask, when we started to talk about trade diversification, one of the things that people seem to be scratching their heads over was shipping logistics. And I just wanted to ask, maybe the private sector partners can answer, but it seems like these things may have existed all along, and it seems like the trade routes carries down to Ghana, and obviously moving into the Caribbean. How difficult that might be or has been, and are we talking more about air or sea freight?
So I'll speak from the government perspective, but I would love for our logistics partners to speak on that because they're on the ground. And so from our perspective, there are two things that we need to do. One, to continue to facilitate the relationships with the countries. And so, for example, in going to Ghana and going to Brazil in particular, we met with various government officials, letting them know of the Bahamas' desire to trade more, mutually export and import with those countries. And so there will be high-level government support for those initiatives. But as you would have suggested, it is very private sector driven, but it has to be very intentional. The trade routes don't currently exist. And so you need the government support to sort of corral businesses to, first of all, even consider diversifying their trade to these countries. And when you have that sort of massive support, you can go to suppliers in those countries and say, hey, we have these amount of businesses ready to order this amount of volume per month. And they begin to help and assist us with introducing us to local partners within their economy. So for example, when we went to Brazil, they told us, well, we already export direct to Jamaica. And so if you want to get in on that trade route, we can send goods that are going to the Bahamas to Jamaica, and it can easily go from Jamaica to the Bahamas. And so things like that sort of naturally come about when you begin those discussions, but it has to be very intentional, and it has to have private sector support, because the volume sort of needs to be there. We're already a small country, and so we're not going to be placing the volume of orders that, you know, much larger countries place, and so it has to be very intentional. But I'll let Carrie speak to it from the very real sort of private sector vantage point.
So thanks, Chester. That's actually a really good question. Currently, most of those trade routes directly into the Bahamas just don't exist, mainly because the shipping lines that would ship interregionally, the size of the vessels just really don't accommodate the amount of trade that we need to bring into the Bahamas. So for instance, if we only bring in about 10 to 12 40-foot containers from a particular country, it really isn't worth their while when they have a ship that carries 1,000 containers. So what we've identified was that we needed to either increase the amount of shipments coming into the Bahamas, which is near impossible based on the size of the vessels which coming, or we invest in our own vessels that could better facilitate trade throughout the region. So what we've been doing is working along with Bahamian-owned vessels that have been utilized to move cargo in and around the Bahamas, but just shift them out of this jurisdiction to bring in cargo that is actually worth the trip coming in from these countries. So on top of that, we've also been working along with a Bahamian partner that has procured vessels that should be here in about 60 days that will facilitate trade throughout the Caribbean. So it's going to, actually, this is what Senator Griffin had spoke about earlier in terms of us creating a trade route interregionally. And we've been speaking to different governments throughout the Caribbean about this, and they're very excited about that, because one of the biggest challenges for us in the Bahamas is, with these trade routes, is that everything is shipped into the United States, and it extends the time when goods come from the production table to actually us as the consumers. With these direct trade routes, we now shorten the time, so from farm to table, and so we receive fresher goods in the Bahamas. But not only that, we have more opportunity to trade interregionally and sort of use the products that we're accustomed to, the products that we have grown up using. You know, instead of us having to sort of import in products that we only have access to through our channels in the United States, we now could get the pigeon peas from countries that eat the same pigeon peas as us. You know, tomatoes and ketchup from countries that use the same products, peppers and other similar products. The same thing with building materials as well, is that we have to get them from places that normally actually get these products directly from the source countries, but it's just that the trade routes didn't exist. Currently, if I want to ship something from Jamaica to the Bahamas, I have to ship from Jamaica to the United States and then move to another shipping company or move it in bond to get back to the Bahamas. What we're trying to do now is create supply chains where we could coexist with these countries throughout the CARICOM. So we have ships that would go to Jamaica, go to Barbados, go to Trinidad, and then circle back here in a route. With our trade route, with our supply chain that we've already created with the Dominican Republic, we now have, it's a 5-day journey from Dominican Republic, Port Maranzillo, to the Bahamas. In 5 days, as soon as the ship comes down, we have another ship going back. So what that equates to is that every 10 days, we have a shipment coming in to the Bahamas from the Dominican Republic. A lot of suppliers, or a lot of consumers could tell you now that it almost takes them 2 weeks to get their stuff from Miami, which is a 1-day journey. So and it's actually cheaper. The rate to ship from the United States, because of the high port fees and because of the other charges that are levied here, not necessarily in the Bahamas, because a lot of the rates in terms of customs are favorable. But the increased port fees in the United States, like we know the other day, they had challenges, so the rates increased, the shipping lines, the cost of fuel, all of these add to what we pay for goods once they reach the Bahamas. When we purchase fuel from these southern countries in the Caribbean, we actually getting a cheaper rate on fuel. We get a cheaper shipping rate, bringing in the pallets into the Bahamas, and at the end of the day, those costs are then passed down to Bahamians. So essentially, to answer your question, what we're doing is creating trade routes that just didn't exist. So, any other questions around that?
Could we see the anti-Caribbean Bahamas open up?
Well, we're looking to start our first routes between Jamaica and the Bahamas in about 90 days. So currently there's a vessel that's supposed to be leaving from the country where it was purchased from. It'll take 45 days to get here. And then another 45 days we've sort of mapped out for us to just iron out the kinks behind it so that we could create a seamless trade flow.
And I know Africa's been a big conversation in the Bahamas. How's that?
Well, Africa is actually, after the conference that was here, the African XM Buying Conference, it allowed us the opportunity to meet so many different trade partners. You know, a lot of these trade partners, we just didn't know that they produce these things in Africa. We didn't know that Starkist tuna was produced in Ghana. You know, like it opened. Right, and we buying it from the States. You know, so what it did, what these conferences did, and a lot with this trade initiative, was introduce us or give us now a seat at the table where we could have these conversations, where we could pursue and we could find out from suppliers and traders that, hey, okay, the journey is 50 days, but I'm getting the goods at such a cheaper rate, and it has a longer shelf life, because the same container, the same goods, the same tuna that we buying in the shelf that was already sitting up in another country for 60 to 90 days. We're now purchasing direct from the supplier, so we're getting a fresher product with a transit time that is actually less than what it would have been from us trying to purchase from other source countries that we are currently trading with. So with the African trade, the African Cooperative Society, led by Melissa Darville and Robin Lightburn and Sabrina LaFleur, they've gathered already, I think, something like 120 Bahamians alone who are traveling for a conference that they're having in Ghana at the end of April. And they have already set up with so many different suppliers. We've already packed and loaded the first container on the way to the Bahamas right now with food products, and also textiles and some other products for local manufacturers. And now they are, a lot of times with Bahamians, they want to see you do it first. So we're just hoping that with this container coming in with a lot of sample products and a lot of products that local small businesses have invested in just to try it out, that this now opens up a door and window for other companies to now look at this as a trade route that we could operate between Africa and the Bahamas. Anything else? No? That's good.
Okay, the question with the tariff. No, I'm not concerned about the customs regime being threatened. You said, as you rightly said, we export very little, we mostly import, and we have customs duties attached to a lot of items. So I'm not concerned about that. Because as you said, when we export stuff into the U.S., it's mostly seafood, all right? So I'm not concerned about any sort of retaliation from that perspective, and therefore us being forced to do something with our import duties. No. What I'm in speaking about this whole tariff scenario, and what concerns me more as a minister is the potential impact it has on the economy of the U.S. and economy of Canada. The economy in Europe, because there's threats about expanding these tariffs. How do they impact the industries? How do they impact economic growth? Will they, if they are implemented and persist, are we looking at a potential recession? What's the impact on, for example, the tariffs when they're put on goods coming from China, and then those things are routed through the U.S. to here? What's the impact on consumer prices, inflation, et cetera, which has been coming down, but with this new round of trade war, is all that in jeopardy? So that is what concerns us more. So we're observing, we're seeing what happens in terms of the tariffs in Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., how that impacts their major industries, and if it should, impact them seriously. Does that lead to economic downturn in those markets, and how does that impact us in terms of our tourism industry? So we continue to observe it, but those are the things that are more on our mind. instead of, any risk or threat, as you said, to the import duty regime.
As you observe it, I guess is there a worry growing, or do you feel?
I wouldn't say worry. I mean, I wouldn't use the word worry. It's a serious matter, because we've seen the some tariffs were supposed to come in yesterday, I think, and then there was some representations made according to the reports by the major U.S. auto manufacturers who made some representation, and then we saw a 30-day sort of grace period, I'd use that word, or suspension for 30 days. Even though that is done, there's still the uncertainty as to what will happen, at the conclusion of the 30 days. And so, uncertainty is never good for economies and people who are responsible for planning. So I wouldn't say worry, I would say concerned, but we are observing it, and from that standpoint, should it persist and should it spread? If we have a trade war with the EU and China and the US, how does that affect global economic output, and then how does that trickle down to us? So that's something we just keep an eye on. And one of the ways, we watch it, but one of the ways we can begin to sort of insulate or protect ourselves is things like increased agricultural production, things like sourcing new markets, opening up new trade routes, and things like making sure that from a financial perspective, our financial house is in order, and that is, the budget debate is going on, they're talking about that now. So, that from a high level in terms of just how does this impact the global economy, and then how does that trickle down to us? Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Just wondering if the Bahamas could further benefit from any new trade agreements between some of these new countries that we're going to start trading.
Yep, so we are actively, to answer your question, I'll start from the sort of big scope. This is a sort of whole of government initiative. We work very, very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that has a Department of Economics and Trade. And so we're utilizing our diplomats across the world to be our trade and commercial attaches who help us to facilitate conversations with other countries. For example, we work very closely with the Brazilian ambassador who's resident here in the Bahamas, and also our ambassador to Brazil, Dr. Dexter Johnson, in terms of liaising with companies in Brazil. And so through all of those initiatives, we're also working with various countries to look at various agreements. And so, for example, on all sort of trips that government ministers and the prime ministers make, the diplomatic team that goes with the prime minister has conversations in those countries with whoever is participating, with countries that we want to do trade with. And so they bring back conversations and agreements, and conversations start from that. So I don't want to say announce prematurely, but I will say that behind the scenes, we are actively working with a number of countries on a number of different types of agreements. And so in the foreign affairs sphere, the sort of most basic agreement you would start with would be, for example, a technical cooperation agreement. And so that's kind of like the precursor to larger agreements if you have new diplomatic relations with a country. And so we're exploring lots of technical cooperation agreements with countries. We're also exploring signing memorandums of understanding with various government agencies in different countries, so agency to agency. And so these things will be sort of the foundation and the floor that we're building for that trade relationship. But the idea is that as we begin to trade more with each other and we see the mutual benefit of it, that we would progress on to larger trade agreements.
When can farming islanders feel the effects of seeing the cost of living decrease? It seems as if super value and the egg situation was isolated to just that one company. When can they now see that?
So as I said before, the eggs and super value is sort of just the very beginning. And so we're also working with stores in the family islands. We're working with a store, Gippy's Pantry, that's in South Andros, to bring relief to South Andros. They're going to be one of our big partners there in terms of bringing goods from Nassau into Andros to facilitate that in Andros. We're replicating that across multiple islands, and as you can see, I just announced that our town halls are starting up once again, and we're starting in the Family Islands. The first one is with Chamber of Commerce on March 19th in Abaco. And so the Family Islands are not forgotten. In fact, they're actually probably highest on our agenda because a lot of what you pay for in the Family Islands is much more expensive than you pay in Nassau. And so we are ensuring that, the Family Islands are looked after. In addition, with the Family Islands in particular, again, whole of government approach. We're working very closely with the Ministry of Transport to modernize Porter's Key Dock. When you think of Porter's Key Dock, you normally think of, people think of Conch Salad and the entertainment that's around there. But Porter's Key is really the country's sort of internal trading hub. It's a shipping hub, and that's how most people on Family Islands get their goods. And so we want to, have better security out there, better logistics. For the last year, we've been moving ships, sunken ships out of the harbor to create more space for vessels to be in there. You see that we recently extended electricity to vendors out there, and so we're working very closely to modernize that. We're also working on sort of building what would you call it? Sort of shade environments at the dock here in Nassau and in various ports in the Family Islands, because one of the things we've discovered is that food spoils very quickly on the dock. They're in the hot sun, they're waiting, and so again, all that adds to the high cost of food. And so we're working very closely with the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Agriculture in alleviating that. So again, the cost of living is a very complicated matter that has lots of, different parts to it. And so it's a whole of government approach where we're all working together to address it.
And also, have any other businesses begin dialogue in terms of trade and getting those cheaper prices?
Thank you for asking that. I should have said that at the very beginning. So the response has been absolutely amazing. We had an incredible influx of businesses contacting us because they want to get in on it. When I speak at various, town halls and meetings, etc., at the end of the meeting, an influx of small businesses wanting to know, how can I get in on this? People letting us know, Bahamians also currently trade a lot with these other countries, but in sort of smaller spares. You have a lot of people letting us know, hey, I buy coffee from this place, or I get, these seeds or these products from this place. Can you find more Bahamians who are willing to buy from this place, because then we can buy in bulk and get a cheaper cost? And so I would say the private sector is very excited about it. They're all looking for deals. They all are interested in competition and want to provide the best products at the best price to increase business. And so we've had incredible interest from the private sector. And so we want to, keep on this momentum and work very closely with them to make sure that in the shortest possible time, we get more goods into the country. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. And I hope you spread the good news to the Bahamian people.
Thank you very much, Senators Griffin, Roll, and Halkitis for being here today. We also want to say a very special thank you to Mr. Howells and Ms. Williams for their very informative presentations. And of course, I want to say thank you to all of the reporters present. Of course, this is a very exciting and dynamic process that we're going through. And surely in the days ahead, you'll hear many more developments about how this is going to go forth. And with that, we want to invite you to come with your questions, queries at any time on this subject matter or any other subject matter that you need information on. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good afternoon.